Welcome home to philosophy, where we wonder about everything and anything is possible. Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Corey, the Laughing Philosopher. Life is complicated. The world is complicated, and you are complicated. Figuring out how to live a happy, meaningful life, guided by wisdom and reason, is not easy. Is life a game? What is love? Should I fear death? Is this a just world? Almost from the moment of birth, you've been told how to behave, how to fit in, and how to fulfill other people's expectations. You fear that you will lack importance or cease to exist in the lives of others if you think for yourself and question the rules and roles you've been told define you. Wisdom and reason will remove this illusion so you can live authentically in the world around you, find your true purpose, and become your real self. Welcome to episode number 114. Hume's Guillotine. Why what is doesn't decide what should be. Ever notice how lack of communication can be the key to a better friendship? Here are some stupid comments from real-life, everyday conversations with my good friends. Animals don't engage in homosexuality, and humans are animals too, so it should be wrong. We have never regulated access to abortion, so we shouldn't do it now. Humans are omnivorous, eating both animal and plant foods, so we should eat meat. Everyone cheats on their taxes, so we ought to just accept it. And I should cheat too. People are naturally selfish, so we should act in our own self-interest. What is stupid about these comments? And what is the best reply to such stupidity? Hume's Guillotine. Ever wonder about how people use facts and factual observations to justify moral conclusions? People will jump from descriptive facts to prescriptive morality as if what is ought to be, simply because what is. This is a misguided and illegitimate but very common error in moral reasoning, known as the Is-Ought Fallacy, or Hume's Guillotine. Hume's guillotine has profound implications whenever people attempt to justify moral principles based solely on factual observations. This is illegitimate moral reasoning, and yet we experience it every day by the dozens. Get ready to use Hume's guillotine to chop off ought from is. Let me explain. David Hume, the 18th century Scottish philosopher, is credited with exposing the Is-Ought Fallacy. Hume challenged the commonsensical assumption that moral truths and ethical principles can be derived directly from empirical observations of human nature and the world. No set of facts can suffice to prove any moral principle. Nothing prescriptive, no moral necessity can follow from mere description of known facts. Facts don't decide morality. Facts can't tell us right from wrong. What is cannot establish what ought to be. As Hume puts it, from what is, what was, or what will be, it does not follow what ought to be. Hume's guillotine refers to a logical fallacy that a moral ought cannot be derived from a factual is. Hume's guillotine slices off ought to be from is. This signifies a razor-sharp separation between descriptive facts and moral values. Hume's guillotine acts like a metaphorical guillotine, cutting off any attempt to bridge the gap between the two. Think about it. Simply observing how things are does not automatically tell you how things should be. The guillotine imagery perfectly signifies the decisive and absolute separation between factual descriptions and moral judgments. How can what something is determine what it should be? Facts can't tell us what is moral from immoral, good from bad, right from wrong. And yet people automatically leap from what is to what should be, unthinkingly and unreflectingly. Stupid reasoning not only assumes that the way something is the way something should be, it can also involve assuming that something should not happen because it doesn't happen or hasn't happened before. When moving from facts to moral prescriptions, Hume showed that this transition is logically invalid unless additional premises are provided to bridge the gap between the descriptive and the prescriptive. The is-ought fallacy is that something should be simply because it is, or something shouldn't be simply because it isn't. Here are more stupid comments from my face-to-face interactions, and this time, along with my smart-assed, David Hume-like responses. Most people don't recycle, so I shouldn't recycle either. Just because the majority of people aren't recycling by itself doesn't mean it's not the wise or the right thing to do. The majority of people have never been a guarantee of wisdom or truth. The majority of people voted to kill Socrates. Barabbas was chosen over Jesus by the majority of people. The majority of people submitted to Hitler. The majority of people once believed that the sun orbits the earth and that human slavery is morally acceptable. The majority of people are always guaranteed to be running away from something they should be running toward, or running towards something they should be running away from. By itself, what the majority of people do can't tell us what the majority of people ought to do. Animals fight each other for food and territory, and we're animals, so we should fight each other for what we want too. Just because animals behave in a certain way doesn't mean it's automatically acceptable for humans to do the same. Furthermore, animals fight for survival, while humans fight for imaginary things like nations and money. Nations and states are just imaginary lines in the dirt. In space, Wyoming doesn't exist, while money is just little pieces of paper. Money has value and importance only because we think and act as if it does. If people behave as if little pieces of paper are valuable, then they are valuable, but valuable only for those who behave as if they are. For other people who may highly value seashells or human teeth, our money is just dirty little pieces of paper with pictures of dead people on it. What animals do can't tell us what is moral and immoral. Marriage has traditionally been between one man and one woman. So same-sex marriage must be wrong and should not be allowed. Once handed down by the dead, tradition exists only with the consent of the living. Yet, as society's norms and values evolve, established practices and inherited ways of thinking and acting must adapt or die. The future should not be held hostage to the permanent dictatorship of the past. Nonconformity changes the world. Conformity accomplishes nothing. Should we conform to tradition, even if it is dysfunctional and out of harmony with modern thinking? Should traditions be obeyed just because they exist? What was in the past can't tell us what ought to be in the present. Humans have always eaten meat, so humans ought to eat meat. Just because something is a long-standing, established practice doesn't mean it's morally right. To justify eating meat because it's natural, one would need to add a value-laden premise, such as, whatever is natural is good, which first would require its own moral justification. What we do or don't do can't tell us what we should or shouldn't do. Facts don't dictate morality. In nature, only the strong survive. So society ought to reward only the strong and just let the weak fail. Observing that survival of the fittest occurs in nature doesn't mean society should adopt the same principle as a moral guideline. Factual observations can't justify moral conclusions. What should be doesn't follow from what is. Some people will always be richer or poorer than others. So we ought to just accept economic inequality as a fact of life and let the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The mere fact that economic inequality exists doesn't suggest or imply that it is morally acceptable or functional for society. Besides, if you believe that everything ought to be just as it is, then how do you account for the universality of change? What is shouldn't change if it's what ought to be, and yet change is real, present everywhere at the same time, and right in front of your eyes. Obesity rates are high in our society, so we should just accept obesity as normal. The mere fact that obesity is common doesn't necessarily mean it is desirable or morally acceptable. Prevalence doesn't necessarily determine normality or morality. In the future, I will probably be replaced by robots. And since there will be no opportunities for advancement or growth, I should just do the bare minimum required of my job. From what will be tomorrow doesn't logically follow what ought to be today. Future facts can't dictate present morality. Do these comments sound familiar? They should. They are everywhere. Even smart people can be stupid. People leap from factual statements to moral statements without providing the necessary value-laden premises to bridge the gap. Factual observations alone do not dictate moral conclusions. Just because something is doesn't mean it should be. Just because something isn't doesn't mean it shouldn't be. The Is-Ought Fallacy is that you can't derive a moral conclusion, an ought, from factual statements about what is. Is and ought are cut off, separate and distinct, and there is no logical transition from what is to what should be. Think about it. Just because something is a certain way, by itself, is no reason why it ought to be that way. And just because something is not a certain way, on its own, is no reason why it shouldn't be that way. Jumping from a factual statement about how things are to a moral conclusion about how things should be may appeal to common sense, but it is misguided moral reasoning. David Hume established a clear distinction between descriptions about what is and prescriptions about what should be. To avoid this fallacy yourself, and to silence stupid people who go for it, just make certain that you provide clear and compelling reasoning for all moral judgments beyond simply stating how something is now. You may need to explain why facts alone cannot dictate moral imperatives without additional reasoning rooted in values and moral principles, which would first require their own justification. And like me, if your explanation should fall on deaf ears, try this parting shot with your friends. Just because it was, is, or will be doesn't mean it should be. What is doesn't decide what ought to be. Let that sink in, stupid.